And once again, Congressman Mike Quigley was right there in the middle of all the action. And Representative Quigley joins us this morning. Hey, good morning, Representative. Thank you for joining us on the show again today.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So I imagine some of the testimony probably didn't come as a surprise to you, but what about that opening statement by Ambassador Sondland? I think a lot of us in the country were surprised that it came out ahead of time and what he had to say when he made his testimony.
Well, clearly he was more emphatic in this testimony than he was during the deposition. When people asked me about it beforehand, I said it's never too late to do the right thing, and Ambassador Sondland did the right thing. He basically outlined what they're calling a quid pro quo. The fact that everyone was in on it, the president wanted it, and they tried to cover it up after the fact.
Yeah, you said everyone was in on it. His exact words, everyone was in the loop. I think that's important when we look ahead to Monday, Congressman, because an important ruling's coming down on former White House counsel Don McGahn, who refused to answer a subpoena by Congress. Should the judge rule that he has to answer that subpoena, might you then expand this investigation and call Mike Pompeo to the stand and Rudy Giuliani? Don't we, Congressman, need to hear from Rudy Giuliani in all this?
Look, I think we take this one day at a time. We've had 2 weeks of explosive testimony. I think we need to take at least 24 hours after today to regroup, reassess, and see what still needs to take place. Obviously, the White House has not released a single document despite lawful subpoenas from Congress, and they've blocked over 12 witnesses. So the question is, how long do you wait for this testimony to come forward? At what point do you realize that you have enough? I point to the president's own words in the White House transcript in which he says, hey, do me a favor. They talked about Latin quid pro quo. I think there's other Latin about res ipsa loquitur. Sometimes it speaks for itself. The president's own words speak for themselves.
Well, the president yesterday, in the middle of the hearing, he was holding his own press conference, and he talked about the fact that he had a July conversation with Sondland, and that at that conversation he had told Sondland no quid pro quo. But Sondland never mentioned that in his opening statement. How much does that bother you that, you know, some said that he should have said it with a 23-page statement in his opening? Why wouldn't you put that information in there?
You know, it happened exactly at the same time the whistleblower complaint came out and people started using the term quid pro quo. So it's interesting that the president uses that term for the first time during this investigation. And then he goes out and says does exactly the opposite. He's saying, don't do this. And then he says, but do this. And what he's detailing is the quid pro quo. And in the phone call, the White House phone call, he lays out the quid pro quo. And this has been corroborated by, what, a dozen witnesses right now.
Hey, Congressman, we're almost out of time. But speaking of Gordon Sondland, he changed his testimony. We know that. Often yesterday he seemed glib as to the seriousness of the charges that are being leveled here. He was talking a lot about catching a flight. Should we be concerned that maybe these ambassadors should be looked into with greater scrutiny, given that this person didn't seem to be taking what you had to say very seriously?
I think the ambassador understands the gravity of the situation at this point in time. I can't explain all our witnesses' behavior and testimony. It's mystifying. I think facts are stubborn things. What troubles me more is the fact that there are those that look at this and still don't have any questions about the president's activity, that he muscled an ally at its most vulnerable point to help himself politically.
All right, well, Congressman Quigley, I do have one more question. I just been given the go-ahead to ask you one more question. You know, the fact that the president had tweeted out the day before, not yesterday, but the day before, he tweeted out something, and he was accused of intimidation. But yesterday, again, he held that press conference at the same time during the hearing. Is that problematic for you?
Well, look, it's a pattern of behavior. When Michael Cohen was coming forward talking about what really took place, he called him a rat, something a mafia boss might say. And when Mr. Manafort said he wasn't going to cooperate with an investigation, he called him a hero. He said the same thing with Rudy. He dangled pardons during the Russian investigation. There's a pattern of behavior, at the very least, of witness manipulation if not attempts to hinder their testimony.
That'll be the last word. Congressman, as always, thank you for your time.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, 6:40 right now.